The hosts feel it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to. Well, we've warned you.
Welcome once again to the Frankencast, episode 2. I am the Mad Doctor, Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm joined by...
I'm the creature, Eric Velazquez, pronouns he, him.
All right, so this week we're doing The Bride of Frankenstein, the second movie in the Universal Frankenstein series. And before we get into, bit by bit, one thing that I wanted to mention right out of the gate was because this movie and the first Frankenstein movie are short, they're a little over an hour each. I tend to watch them as a double feature. This may be one of the few times that I have watched one, waited a full week, and then watched the other. And it was really interesting to, I noted a lot more differences between the two movies that I didn't catch when I'm watching them so close together. And watching them close together, it feels like they're one thing, and watching them separate, I really started to notice how much had changed in the time between when James Whale directed the first and when he directed the second one. I don't know if you noticed anything but we talked about last time, there's no music in the original. It's all just sound, dialogue and sound effects and stuff. And this one has a score. It feels more produced, we talked about the sets last time. The sets in this are a little more realistic. It doesn't feel so much like a play. There's a lot more cuts in scenes. It's not just the camera sitting there filming one scene and then, cut to the next scene. There's a little bit more dynamic camera movement and action and stuff. So I thought that was kind of interesting, just seeing the development of his style over the couple years between the two movies.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of changes, especially in cast, as you noted a bit ago, as far as changes are concerned. So we now have, I believe, Valerie Hobson replacing the previous actress, Mae Clark. So that was kind of a surprise. Also, we had the noticeable absence of the Baron and the disappearance of Victor Moritz. So those two characters notably absent. The inclusion of Dr. Pretorius in the place of Dr. Waldman. And as you noted a moment ago, a significant increase in production value, that I would say. Even in the first few scenes or first moments, you actually see the miniature. And if you didn't know it was a miniature, and this was the first time you'd ever seen anything like this, you would say, oh, that's a pretty cool looking castle. But, that's just a little bit of some of the other things changing, as well as the increase in musical score. Everything was a lot more operatic. This one had a lot more melodrama to it.
Oh, definitely. And also, speaking of the cast, I thought it was kind of funny. Obviously the creature kills off Fritz in the first movie, and there's just some new lab assistant guys, and they just got Dwight Fry again. He's basically Fritz again, but his name's Carl in this one.
Hey, but he has a friend named Ludwig, so we have that going on for us.
Yeah.
Right.
But Dwight Fry's just so good at being that he's Renfield in the Dracula movie. He's got to be a creepy sidekick. He's just born for it.
Absolutely. He plays it so well, especially later on whenever he commits a murder just for the case of getting a heart. So
yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely want to talk about that heart when we get to it.
Oh yeah.
But okay, well, and also, we talked last time that at the beginning of the movie it was the creature ? And this time you've got Universal presents Karloff in huge letters.
With the bride ? Question mark. Dun,
Yeah.
Dun, dun.
And I also thought it was kind of nice. So, like, Elsa Lanchester is in the dual roles of the bride and also Mary Shelley. So in this one, like, she's credited on the first screen as, Mary Shelley, and then the bride question mark, which they kept at the end too. They didn't even credit her as the bride at the end.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. I do like how they actually tried to tie this into that fateful day in Geneva that we mentioned in the first episode.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. It placed the characters are talking about that the novel exists. This is sort of, it's a sequel, so they kind of use it as like a previously on, where Byron's basically like, so what happens next in the story? Now that you've made this story famous, I've always wondered what comes after, and she has a part 2.
Yep, she's ready, locked and loaded already with it. So, all right, do you want to go ahead and get into it?
Yeah. So, after that, you've got, just a little sort of framing story. Got Byron, Percy, Mary. She kind of, they actually cut to some clips from the previous movie as she sums up what happens in the first one, and then, picks up where it left off. It starts literally with the burning windmill. Like, it just...
Now, also going back to Byron, I did notice that he called himself the greatest singer in England, and Percy Shelley as the greatest poet. And I really thought it was pretty great that the actor was trilling his R's incredibly, more than he needed to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that actor was, in fact, Gavin Gordon. I almost said Gavin Gordon. Don't know who Gavin Gordon is. Gavin Gordon was Lord Byron.
Okay.
All right, yep.
Yeah, so then, we start at the burning windmill. That whole epilogue at the last movie where Henry and Elizabeth are sitting, she's sitting beside his bed and everything, they kind of gloss right over that, because we start at the windmill burning. You've got this old lady who kind of steals the show throughout.
In a sense, don't they really like kind of undo the ending of the first one? Like, there's no moment where Baron Frankenstein is actually jovial and like, oh, let them have their little honeymoon. It is basically Henry is gravely injured. They're taking him back to the castle. And as you said, Minnie is effectively chewing all of the scenery around her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's a lot of fun. And actually, I didn't notice this, but I had it pointed out to me that in the scene with Percy and Byron and Mary, at the very beginning of it, there's a woman leading some like hounds out of the room. No real explanation for why, but that's also Minnie. So she is in the little framing thing with Mary and Percy and Byron as well. Same actress, like obviously, presumably a different character, but that actress leading the dogs off. And then now we've got her. She's up in arms about the creature. She's throughout the whole thing, like, nobody will listen to Minnie, and Minnie's usually right. As things go, no one takes how dangerous the creature is seriously, except for Minnie. Yeah, so she talks to the burgomaster. There's like this whole crowd scene with the mob. Then does it just go to where Maria's father shows up?
Yeah, more or less. So once they've basically assumed that Henry is being taken back to Castle Frankenstein, at that point Hans and his wife are deciding... Hans is deciding, let's go ahead and make sure this thing is dead. His wife is dissuading him against that action. But of course, him being the stubborn individual that he is, gets right into it and starts checking on the monster to make sure that it is in fact dead and burned up.
And it turns out that he was maybe right to check, but it didn't go so well for him.
He was a little overzealous, right? He just fell into that big pit and somehow survived the fall initially, only to be murdered by the monster.
Yeah, and then the monster goes to climb out, and the Hans' wife thinks that it's Hans.
Can we talk about this real quick?
Yeah,
I feel like the upcoming, as of the time of this recording, it's not confirmed, denied, whatever, that this is what Halloween Kills is going to be paying homage to, right? Where Michael Myers is reaching up out of the flames. One of the firefighters is grabbing for his hand, and then they cut, or at least in the trailers that we've seen so far, that's exactly what happens. So that felt like a real solid homage to this scene.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right. And yeah, it's one of those, like in real life you would probably be more observant or whatever, but in a movie it's just so good because what's happening, she doesn't know what's happening, and she gets her comeuppance as well. So now that whole family has been put down by the creature.
Unfortunate, so unfortunate. But to be fair, I mean, she was also trying to get her husband up, looking away, trying to struggle and pull, so who's to say that she wouldn't have noticed his very clammy, very large, very rotted hands?
Yeah.
Give her the benefit of the doubt.
And the creature is noticeably, that's one really nice thing, is like they didn't just make him look the same. Like you can tell he has been through what happened in the last movie. His hair is singed, he's got some like flaky skin on his hands where they're burnt away a little bit. And pretty much from here for the rest of the movie, he doesn't have those like bangs that he has in the first movie. They're just kind of burned away.
Yeah, and his head's noticeably flatter, or at least seems to be, because, as you said, the hair's probably singed off. And we're actually noticing every once in a while when he turns around, there's some metal bands, or at least some reflection thereof, that looks like staples.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So at this point, yeah, Hans is dead, his wife is dead, the whole family is unfortunately dispatched. We notice that he does stumble upon our good friend Minnie.
Yeah, and she gets to say, "It's alive." Mm-hmm. So we get that line again. And so then that's about where like it catches up sort of to the previous movie, I guess. Like this is where you get Henry home on the slab, although like you said, he's definitely more injured in this. He's not like, comfortably like canoodling with Elizabeth. Like he's damaged from the windmill fall, as he should be. He's
visibly beaten up, and as you said, damaged. Yeah,
and that's like I believe originally he was not necessarily going to survive, or there wasn't going to be the nice epilogue scene. And I think the studio kind of made James Whale put it in, and I think this kind of feels like he was like, well, now I'm going to do this the way I meant it to be, and I'm just going to ignore the little thing you made me add in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and as another aside, this movie is, I'm not going to say noticeably darker, but the tone is more subdued in several ways. There's not like the bombastic action in a lot of instances, but there is more melodrama. So it seems like this is, whereas you pitied the monster more in the first one, it's in this one he is a very credible threat. He is malignant. He does mean you harm in many cases, even though he is still trying to find his humanity. So I thought that was pretty interesting, that even this early on, everything was just a darker tone.
Yeah, he's still sympathetic, but he's a lot more villainous. Like he's transitioned from like a pitiful creature to like almost an anti-hero. Mm-hmm. Like he has things that he wants, and he's gonna do what he can, do whatever it takes to get those things, primarily to find someone like him. He wants to make a human connection with someone, and whatever that takes, whatever that looks like, mm-hmm. He's gonna do it.
But continuing on, we notice, or at least I noticed, that Elizabeth, this is a bit of continuity that I thought was pretty good, was that Elizabeth actually mentioned her little psychic visions again at this point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because she did in the last movie say that, she had like a bad feeling about this, basically. And yeah, she goes into that and says something's coming for them. I did notice also before Henry wakes up in bed, there's a moment where like there's just like a shot of his hand that's still, and then it moves, and it kind of like echoes back to the last movie as well.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so then, Elizabeth has her sort of like fortune teller moment, and then the something that's coming, you think it's the creature, but in fact, Dr. Pretorius shows up, barges in, and demands to see Henry.
Already, one of his immediate entrance is amazing. Everything about Pretorius, he is one of the greatest villains, at least one of the most undersold villains that I think I've seen. Just going back and revisiting this movie, he has so many lines about how gin is his one and only weakness, and then later on how cigars are his one and only weakness. This guy is oozing villain.
And yeah, you can definitely tell that James Whale likes Pretorius a lot. There's definitely a lot, I think we talked about it last time a little bit. James Whale was an out gay man in Hollywood in a time where that wasn't very acceptable, and you definitely get the sense that Pretorius is also a gay man. In fact, like when he shows up, I think Elizabeth describes him as a very queer-looking gentleman. And yeah, like throughout the movie, he talks about that Henry was able to create life in a more natural way, but he had to do it with growing seeds in test tubes and stuff. There's definitely like a sense that like Henry is a part of natural order and that Pretorius is outside of that.
Right. A little bit of perversion, quote unquote.
And of course, you also have Henry and Pretorius, two men who, come together to try to create life together. Yeah, so there's definitely that. And of course, you also had that in the last movie with, Henry and Waldman or Henry and Fritz. Like there's a lot, all the life creators in this are men, and that's contrary to, biological imperative that we see in life. So there's definitely a lot of nods to that, and you can tell that James Whale is sort of, he has some things to say about the way that his existence is viewed in his society.
Right. And of course, Pretorius is portrayed by Ernest Thesiger. Don't yell at me too much about that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you pronounce, but like he's fantastic in it. And I actually heard that it was originally written for Claude Rains, who in the Universal, the Invisible Man. And like Claude Rains is fantastic, but like I don't know. I think that this guy just knocks out of the park. I don't know that I would want to see Claude Rains in this role.
No, not at all. The current Dr. Pretorius is the best Dr. Pretorius in this. I mean, I would not replace him at all.
Yeah,
I feel like you're going to lose a lot of the drama, and he has so many odd but also endearing movements about him. Like there's moments when they cut in on him and he's holding his hands at very odd angles, like he's pushing the camera away, but like down and out.
Yeah, and the camera is a lot of time. Yeah, it's usually under him that kind of gives him like his head looks really big, like his brain is just like swelling with all this wild information that he has.
Maybe like he's looming over the whole movie, huh?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And Henry goes with Dr. Pretorius to his lab to see these new experiments. And this is, where Pretorius offers up the toast to a new world of gods and monsters. Which
Gotta
is just,
love it.
Yeah, one of the best lines in this movie. And of course, later became that's where the title of the movie Gods and Monsters comes from. That's sort of I don't know if you've seen that one. We'll probably do that one down the road at some point. That tells the story of the making of these movies.
Right, absolutely.
So yeah, then Pretorius brings out his little jars of miniature people, and the special effects in this are fantastic. Like even for today, like they look great. And then if you just think about all that they had to do to make that look the way that it looks, like today, somebody can just, do some quick CGI, cut out the people, green screen them, move them right onto the scene. But like the work that went into making this look real. And just when they're in the jars, it looks great. And then you've got the king gets out of the jar and walks around, and Pretorius picks him up. And I mean, it looks seamless.
One effect that actually leading into that, I want to find out how they did it. Whenever he slides him back into the jar, it literally looks like they just dropped the king into the jar and he slides down his throne. So I'm like, did they actually put him on a slide? And he literally fell into that one position, then maybe they raised it up. How did they do that? Because, as you said, that was seamless.
Yeah, it's one of those things where sometimes less technology is more impressive than more technology, because you can't see the trick. Like, now that would have been nothing, and we wouldn't have been impressed, because it's just like, oh, of course, we know how they did that. They put it in a computer, and they moved some stuff around, and everybody knows what Photoshop is. It's whatever. But, like, this took a lot of work, and you still can't tell how it was done.
Right. And then going back into that, he reveals that he made the mermaid out of seaweed, apparently, at some form or fashion. No actual explanation of how. I guess that makes sense. To a degree, electricity jolting a dead body back to life makes a degree of sense. I'm not sure, though, how they did that with the seaweed. I guess maybe genetics. Maybe he knew genetics before it was really a thing, right?
Yeah, well, because he says that he did the other ones. He created them out of seeds, and
That's
like
true.
so that could be that could be like human seed, like sperm, or that could be that they're all from various types of plants that he somehow manipulated, and so of course the mermaid has to be seaweed.
Of course.
And I also really like there's like the devil character that he has, and he says that it bears a certain resemblance to him, and then also says, sometimes I wonder if life would be more amusing if we were all devils, with no nonsense about angels and being good. So like Pretorius is just leaning hard into being evil. Like he's not even
faking it.
Yeah, exactly. Like now you've got like villains who think they're doing the right thing or whatever, but he's like, nah, like I think being evil is better. Let's all be evil.
Right. Let's do what we want, when we want, how we want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when Henry's not so impressed, Pretorius echoes his line from the last movie and says, "You think I'm mad?"
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a little bit of madness involved in all of this, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Then, of course, but here's another thing. At this point, Henry is gung ho. He's kind of like, "Yes, I am in for this. Let's not have learned my lesson, and let's do this thing." Even though I tried to destroy my creation, let's get back into this. So he's sold at this point.
Yeah, because and there's the scene where Pretorius finally comes out and says it, like, let's create a woman, let's make a mate for the creature so that they can multiply and start a new race. I think that's when Henry just is like really on board. Like this is the plan. We can send them out into the world, and then our creations will propagate. And like, I mean, that's when they really ascend to godhood. Like creating one living thing that can't do anything. Yeah. That's one level. Play. But when you create living things that can then propagate, and that's like biblical. Be fruitful and multiply. I think he actually says that phrase in there. And so at this point, we're like 30 minutes into the movie, and finally, like the creature shows up again. Like there's been this long sort of gap. You have him at the beginning escaping, and then we're just with Henry and Pretorius for a good 30 minutes or so. And then you've got the creature. He's just wandering through the woods, kind of lost. He sees his reflection in the water and is disgusted by his own appearance. And then you've got a shepherd girl who sees him and is also disgusted by his appearance and falls into the water.
From a pretty good height, nonetheless.
Yeah, and
like she faints and just whoosh.
Okay. Yeah, and then the creature gets like a hero moment. Like he failed the little girl in the first movie, but like now he knows what's happening. This girl has fallen into water, and humans can't handle water, so he's
got to get her out, right?
Yeah, and so that's where you get like where the hero sort of, or the creature is sort of like an anti-hero. He will break the rules to get what he wants, but he's not evil like Pretorius. He's not just hurting people for no reason. So in this case, where it doesn't benefit him to let this girl die, he's not going to let her die.
It's clear that he's like just a giant toddler who's trying to find his place in the world. And in this one, it's more he's trying to find that place, and he's trying to make that place, versus the initial one where he's just bumbling because he's a toddler, stumbling into situations and finding himself at the worst end of it. Now, also, did you notice, though, in this segment, when they zoom in on his face, it looks like they almost went back to the original makeup, or at least something very close to it.
Huh? No, I didn't catch that. So, like the pre-burn makeup, or like
and almost the same hairstyle and everything.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, that's interesting. I wonder if that's a cut from a previously unused footage, or maybe it was used in the previous movie. But it looked like for just a moment he looked like he wasn't burned or went through any of that.
Well, there was that moment where like the girl wakes up and she screams and he growls, and it's very similar to that scene when Elizabeth sees him in her bedroom, where they just kind of go back and forth and she screams and he so I wonder if they did just use that little clip and like reuse it to not have to shoot it again.
We're gonna have to investigate that and find out.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
But at this point, he gets discovered by hunters as he's trying to help revive the shepherdess. And at that moment, they basically capture him and begin stringing him up.
Yeah, and this scene it's super biblical. They tie him to that log, and when they lift him up, like there's just a moment where like it basically freeze frames for a second of him just like they're basically just throwing the log into a truck. But right when they get him perfectly vertically, where he's he looks like Christ on the cross. Like they just stop a minute and let you just think about that for
Right.
a good 10 seconds before they drop him into the truck. And you know, I feel like Whale wanted you to look at that and think about that for a minute. It just, I don't know exactly his definite intention, but he definitely wanted you to think for a minute. Like when you read the story in the Bible, like you've got all these people who misunderstand this figure and, you know, blame him for things that he may or may not have done, or what, you know, there's definitely an ignorant mob judging a person for things they don't understand. And then you have that again right here. And, you know, I don't think the creature has a lot of Christ-like elements, but I definitely think that there's something there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an analogy here, and then later on, there's another callback to that a little bit when the monster or the creature is escaping through the cemetery.
Yes.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, so then they throw him in the wagon, take him to jail, bind him in this really bizarre chair that's got like a clamp around his head. It kind of looks like a electric chair, but it's not. It's just it's just chains and this weird vice head clamp thing. And Minnie pops up and tells the police that they better keep a close eye on him because he's going to get away. And she was right.
Dude, I don't know how you're going to get out of that thing. I mean, he's locked in tight, right?
Yeah, I mean, they like screw several chains into the ground. He's got things around his wrists and ankles and that weird block around his head. But as soon as they leave the room, I mean, it takes him just a few seconds to...
No time at all. Just rips that chain right out of the ground.
They should have listened to Minnie.
I mean, they should have.
So then, he gets up, punches a door right off its hinges, and strolls back out into the street.
Oh, and right before this, though, I do like the fact that even though the entire town knows that there is a effectively undead creature that they just caught, the burgomaster decides, hey, everyone, go home. It's just an escaped lunatic. What? Okay.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
Yeah, it's not like we just saw this monster that we just put into these bindings downstairs. No. Just go home. Okay. But then he attacks a group of travelers. And as they're sitting down for dinner.
Oh, the ones out in the woods?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I felt like that was, back then they would call it like a gypsy caravan. Like now we would say that these are Romani people. And you see Romani people a lot in like the Dracula movies and a lot in the Wolfman movies. But I think this is like the only appearance of like the Romani people in Frankenstein movies, as far as in the Universal movies at least. But I definitely think that was like a nod to like this is a trope that we see these folks in these movies a lot. And in this case, I think the creatures led to their camp by the smells of their cooking food, and he really just wants something to eat, but of course scares the family and then has to fight them off, which unfortunately ends. The end result is the food falls in the fire and nobody gets dinner.
Oh, that's sad. But yeah, he gets chased off at this point to an older gentleman, or I'm sorry, he finds or he hears the sound of wonderful violin music being played. So he tracks that down to an elderly gentleman's house, and he makes a new friend.
And this whole sequence is so, like, you just want to live in it forever. Like, you just want this pleasant situation where, like, this blind man and this mute creature come together and, like, there's no judgment. They're friends. They share meals together. The man plays music for this adoring audience, and, it's just so perfect. And, like, the whole time, the tension there is just, like, that it can't sustain, but you want it to so bad. The man like cries tears of joy that God has sent him a friend, and we know the creature has wanted a friend more than anything, so it's just so lovely. And the man starts teaching the creature how to speak. He learns a few basic words. He teaches him how to smoke a cigar. which
oddly comes back again in a surprising way.
Yeah, and of course, like, he's scared of fire to start with, and like the man kind of explains like fire can be good or bad. There's this whole thing of like being alone is bad, having friends is good, drink is good, smoke is good, but fire can kind of go either way, and the creature sort of, smoking, he learns, like, this fire can burn me, but if I use it as a tool, it's a good thing.
Right, exactly. And I think to a degree, even a lot of people consider, once again, smoking and alcohol as evil as well, and to a degree, but it's kind of how you use it, right?
Yeah.
Everything in this movie is about how you. Okay, good.
Yeah. That absolutely, like you said. And in this case, it's about being social. It's a way to connect to other people, which is still today. There are social drinkers, social smokers. Like, it's this way that you can connect and just spend time in someone's company and just enjoy that moment. And that's exactly what they do together. And it kills me that it doesn't go on forever. Like, I just want it so much for the creature.
It would be so nice if that's how it just ended, and he's just living with this old guy for the rest of his old blind man for the rest of their lives, and everything's happy. But unfortunately, that's not how it ends.
Nope.
They're discovered by some hunter, or the hunters that were hunting the monster.
Yep, the hunters show up. They're lost, and they ruin everything once again. And there's just this whole kind of like, it would be funny if it wasn't so sad, where like the creature's right there and they're talking to this blind man like, "Hey, look there's a monster right here with you. Do you not see this?" And he's like, they're like, "Oh, you're blind." But then of course there's a fight, and in the fight the fire spreads and fire becomes bad again and burns down the home.
Absolutely. It seems, unfortunately, like fire just chases this thing around. I wonder if that has something to do with the quote-unquote purifying effects of fire, and how the creature or monster is kind of a blemish on nature. Maybe it's trying to right itself.
Yeah, and also Mary Shelley's book, the subtitle was The Modern Prometheus. And Prometheus is the myth about
bringer of fire.
Yeah, so there's definitely fire has been tied up in this story right from the beginning.
100%. But yeah, so our intrepid anti-hero is chased once again into a graveyard where he finds a statue of a saint, and he just pushes it right over. But calling back to that earlier scene that we were talking about, he sees a crucifix, and he just stops and stares at it for a moment. And it's almost like Boris Karloff wants to turn and just wink at the camera.
Oh, yeah.
Leading back to that whole religious, persecution of Christ, and his the passion thereof, and all the tortures that he had to endure. So, and then of course,
Christ ends up being like the way for him, because that's where he finds an entrance to a crypt. Like, he crawls down a hole right next to that crucifix, and finds shelter in this crypt.
And lo and behold, who should appear?
Yeah, Praetorius and his band of resurrection men shows up, including our friend Carl.
Fritz Carl.
Yeah. So yeah, the creature hides, and they look for bodies, and mostly dig up or like find skeletons, and kind of discuss like, oh yeah, these bones will probably be good. And I think the resurrection men head out with the bones, and Praetorius is just like, I'm just gonna chill here for a while, guys. I'll meet you back at the house later. He's just
I'd rather like it here.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have a smoke and hang out in this crypt, which works out in his favor, because the creature's right around the corner, and he knows smoking is good, so he sees a new friend and a new companion to socially smoke with.
Mm-hmm. They have a little bit of wine, a little bit of bread, a little bit of smoking, and they have a nice little conversation. Well, to a degree.
Yeah, and the creature asks him if he's a friend, and he says, I hope so. And then he proposes, or Praetorius proposes his plan to create a mate for the creature. And yeah, obviously the creature's on board. That's what he's been looking for, for 1.5 movies, I guess, at this point. And Praetorius says, do you know who Dr. Frankenstein is? And he says, he made me from dead. Love dead, hate living.
Hate living.
Yeah,
exactly. How great a line is that?
Yeah. It's fantastic. So they're now a team. So Praetorius has got 2 different partners that he now has to bring together, knowing that Henry's probably going to be a little bit reluctant. So they show up, or Praetorius shows up at Henry's home by himself, and kind of like goes into his sales pitch.
Well, yeah, and it also seems like Henry Frankenstein at this point, he already has cold feet and he knows what's coming, and he's like, let's get out of here before this guy gets back. Mm-hmm. And it's like they're trying to get out of the house, him and Elizabeth, before anything worse can happen. But of course he doesn't. Yeah. As you said, Pretorius shows up.
Yeah, and he makes his pitch and then brings the creature in, and Henry is not happy about seeing the creature again. And like ultimately, he's like, fine, like we can talk about this, but I'm not going to talk about this with him in here. Like, get him out of here, and then we can have a discussion, but I want no part of that anymore. So he's still completely shunning his original creation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, so at that point, Pretorius is like, all right, well, he'll go. But as he's letting out the creature, he basically says, all right, go ahead and do what you were going to do anyway, so...
Yeah, there's definitely, like, you get the sense that Pretorius knew this was how it was going to go down, because, like, they had this planned out. He's closing the door and he just goes, now, and shuts the door. And
right?
So, like, he had a conversation with the creature beforehand, because as soon as he closes the door, the creature heads around to the back of the house, pops in Elizabeth's window, and, kidnaps her. So again, echoing that first movie where he shows up in her bedroom, and that quickly gets Henry on Pretorius's side, because now there's a hostage involved, so Henry's got to go along with it.
Absolutely. So he's pulled into that. And actually, I thought that was a pretty amazing scene when the monster actually burst into the room, because he almost looked heroic whenever he was walking in. It was like he's threatening, but he's also like, I'm here to get my justice.
Yeah, it's definitely like a grand entrance moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But as he kidnaps Elizabeth.
Yeah, and then I think we go right to the original castle laboratory set. And I mean, it's the same one. It looks, exactly like it did in the first movie. So they held on to it for a couple years, and they go up, they go upstairs to the lab, and there's a little bit of different equipment, but for the most part, it's the same place. This, I thought, was a really interesting thing. They start talking, or Henry shows Pretorius like a heart that they are working on, like, hitting it with electricity, and they've got little gauges to see how well it's beating and stuff. So the first movie is all about getting a brain. It's all about getting the right brain to make the creature, conscious and as human as possible. And this movie is all about the heart, which I think there's definitely like some like ideas of like men being like the cerebral intellectuals and women being very emotional, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff in there. But I think it also, I don't think it's necessarily speaking ill of women so much as that like men could use some more heart, that maybe that's where we messed up the first time around. That's why the creature is murderous and uncontrollable. But if we get the heart correct this time, maybe we can get this creation right.
Right, exactly. And then maybe they could balance each other out in some form or fashion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but at that point, the heart actually stops or slows down on the beating until it actually stops.
And that's when they'd have to decide they've got to get it. Oh, he says, this heart is useless. I must have another. It must be sound and young. Mm-hmm. So they need something fresh. And I believe Frankenstein says something like, there are always accidental deaths occurring. And Pretorius knowingly says, always. And
absolutely.
I don't know that Henry knows what that means, but Pretorius is definitely like, we got to go kill somebody and get a fresh heart.
And then Carl Fritz is like, oh, I'm on it. I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah, I'm going to go down to the, what was it he called it? The accident hospital?
Yeah.
Wasn't that exactly what he called it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And the accident hospital turns out to be around a corner waiting for an unsuspecting victim who he wraps a scarf around her face and presumably murders her and claims her heart and brings it back.
Yeah. And I think it's really funny. So, we've talked about Dwight Frye being Fritz and then Carl, but like anybody who has like a casual sort of acquaintance with the Frankenstein story, they always talk about Igor, and like these first two movies that are sort of the most iconic, we don't even get Igor. Yeah, Igor comes later. It's the same character basically over and over again, but we don't get that Igor name until later.
That is a pretty interesting thing that's actually been tied in, and yet it's Not really, to my recollection, not really in the books.
Yeah. There's no sidekick at all really in the book. So
right.
I think the sidekick character originated in the plays, and I think it was basically the Doctor needs somebody to talk to, or this play is going to be very boring.
Right.
And then it, obviously that just continued with the movies. You need that sounding board to respond to, and obviously it's that character, whatever name that he's using, like, has become like an iconic part of the story.
Exactly. So at this point now they actually have a working heart. It's been going strong for, I believe, 90 minutes, and it still seems to be going just fine. However, our creature is getting impatient. He wants his friend. He wants his companion.
Yes. Oh, and there's a little moment where, like, Henry's getting cold feet again, and the Pretorius allows him to speak to Elizabeth over basically a phone. And, like, They kind of have this whole, like, this is this strange technology that I've come up with.
The 1800s mobile phone?
Yeah. So in this story, it's canon that Dr. Pretorius invented the phone. Yeah. So don't forget it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so then we see the bride for the first, well, sort of see her for the first time. She's fully wrapped in bandages, just basically looks like a mummy.
We're skipping the kites? We're skipping the whole fact that they use kites this time?
Oh, well, yeah, so we see her on the slab, and then, they, like, the whole setup this time is much stranger than the first one. Like, the last time you just raise him up, get him struck by lightning, let him down, that's it. But this time there's, like, there's kites, there's this weird electrode thing that's, like, sort of in between the kites and the bride. And you've just got her on the slab looking like a mummy, fully wrapped up, like feet bound together and everything. Like, she's not moving. And then, they send Carl and his buddy up there onto the roof to fly some kites. So you got some Ben Franklin action going on there.
Right. Exactly.
And by this time, like, there's a storm coming. And at this point, we have 10 minutes left in this movie. We've not.
A lot happens in this 10 minutes.
Yeah, so we haven't seen the bride's face yet. In the original movie, the creature is created pretty early in the film, but this is the moment in the movie, and it's right there at the end. So there's this whole elaborate thing of the kites going up, the electrical thing going up as well, and then they raise. At first, I was thinking that the bride wasn't even going to go up. I couldn't remember. But so she does eventually get raised up to the ceiling as well, but I think it's more the electricity is not hitting her, it's going through all of this apparatus and then being passed into her body.
Right. There's a really cool shot, though, of them actually raising her, like, on the platform. That's something you got a little bit of that in the first one, but it actually looks like you see the actress coming up, like, the camera stationed above her initially to a degree, and then you actually see her start rising. Then it pans back a little bit and you see her go the rest of the way up the platform, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool, especially for that era in technology. Like, I don't know if maybe they had a pulley system, but it looked really good.
Yeah, that's again, like, James Whale's definitely playing a lot more with the camera. Like, the first movie was a play where they just set the camera and just let people act in front of it. But here he's thinking about shots and composition and, maybe I can cut to this angle and kind of give you more of an impact of the story. And there are cuts and some close-ups and stuff in the first movie, but, like, this definitely feels more intentional.
Absolutely.
So then you got, the sciencey moment. There's sparks and all this crazy, electricity stuff going on. And the creature arrives just in time to be there for the bride waking up, and also to throw one of the assistants off the roof.
He throws Carl off the roof. He turns him into a dummy again, and then throws him off the roof. Why? I guess just because he's impatient or doesn't like the electricity/fire. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's probably his most senseless murder in any of these movies, or in these first two movies at least. Like, he just, no particular reason, just chucks him off the roof.
You remind me of a guy that I knew.
Yeah. Looks a little familiar.
Like fire. Yeah. But yes, and at this point, she's alive. And then Pretorius drops the name of the movie, Bride of Frankenstein.
Yes. And also, it occurred to me when he says that, here's all the permission you need. That created woman is not the bride of Henry Frankenstein. She's the bride of the creature. So if it's the bride of Frankenstein, we can call the creature Frankenstein. Pretorius says
there you
so.
Go. Yep. He gave us permission. It's done here.
Yep. So and then from there you finally get like her bandages off, and that's it. I think it's at 1 hour and 10 minutes into this movie, which is an hour and 15 minutes long. You finally see the bride in all her glory, and it's wild to me that like she's almost as iconic as the creature himself, and is only in this movie. That's her only appearance in the Universal series, and it's for like less than 5 minutes. But like you could, she's on T-shirts and posters, and there are action figures and everything. Like this character who has like 4.5 minutes of screen time total. Period. No real lines. She like screams once and hisses once like a feral cat, and she is just so iconic. And I mean that's a testament to how well Elsa Lanchester just embodied the character, and to just the character design, like the hair, which is actually her real hair. I saw that like apparently they like built a wire cage and then like wove her real hair through it. The white lightning bolts are like fake hair added in, but and in fact it looks like black hair, but I saw a color photo from back then, and it's red. Her hair's red because Elsa Lanchester's hair is red, so it's just red hair, but it looks black and white, and that's all. That's the only time she's been in the movies, so everyone just has assumed that it's black all these years.
Okay. That's fair, and it's probably because you assume the creature itself has black hair.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, there's a logical line going through that. But also, like, what do you think about her movements? It's very bird-like, I think.
Oh yeah, it's twitchy. I mean, it's very animalistic. It's like the creature felt very like a child. Like the way he moved, like he moves his hands, like he doesn't know what to do with them, like a kid or something. But she moves quick, and like it's very angular. A bird like is very apt, or like a squirrel or something, where it's just like she moves really fast and then freezes and then moves really fast again. Yeah,
for the creature, it's lumbering. That's the best way to describe him. Everything he does is lumbering. But for her, it's quick and sharp and angular.
Yeah, like it feels like he didn't know what to do with his body, and she knows exactly how to move her body, but she still doesn't know what's going on in the world around her.
Right.
And so then the creature shows up and asks it, friend, and she screams, which, of course, like everything in the world is strange and new to her. So of course she's just going to respond to this large, like, as an animal would. If something is imposing, it's going to elicit fear in an animal.
Right.
So she screams, and of course he says, she hate me. And
you take like all certain fellas, he takes it as immediate rejection, whereas it may just be, I don't know you.
Yeah. He doesn't really give her time to get to know him.
Right.
And so, I mean, he pretty much immediately like goes to grab this random lever on the wall. like let's just shut this whole thing down.
No, don't do it. You'll atomize us.
Yeah.
Pretorius says.
Yeah. And I think that probably, I believe there was like a version of this where like he did just throw the switch and everybody's gone. And again, the studio was like, James, like you gotta like give him a little bit of a happy ending, or you're not gonna get him to come back when we do the next one.
Right, or give us some room to make a third movie. Come on, these things are making all kinds of money.
So of course Elizabeth shows up then and gives Henry an escape, and the creature like sort of forgives Henry in this moment and says, no, you go live, like you deserve to live, you have a life ahead of you, you should go live it. But then he points at Pretorius and he says, you stay, we belong dead. Like, so the three of us are going down together.
Yep, he flips that switch,
and then you get the bride hiss like to me it sounded like a cat, but apparently she Elsa Lanchester went to a park and listened to like swans and like geese. Like that was the hiss sound that she was going for. And
so that's like a callback to the bird-like thing. She was kind of channeling a goose.
Yeah,
or geese. Okay.
And
that makes sense.
So she like twitches to the side and makes that crazy hiss. Creature throws the lever, castle explodes. You have the big moment where the camera's outside the castle and you just got fire and lightning and sparks and everything, and everybody's gone, but then you see Henry and Elizabeth standing off to the side, embracing, looking on at the carnage. And so once again, they sort of get the better of everybody and have their nice little sweetheart moment at the end of the movie after everything else falls apart.
Yeah, but there's no saccharine sweet jokes at the end, and it just kind of it is a more somber ending than the first one.
Yeah, like they're going to be able to go on, but yeah, it's not the toast to the House of Frankenstein. It's just kind of like they've been through all this trauma and now that they've got to move on. And in fact, as we'll see in later movies, it's not Henry that continues. We don't see Henry and Elizabeth anymore. This is their moment to exit the story and survive. Basically, like the creature said, they're going to go live, and the creature is going to continue on in his dark, horrific story.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, if they destroy that beautiful miniature that I mentioned earlier, that thing gets popped open.
Yeah.
But for now, this ends the story of the House of Frankenstein until there's an heir.
Yes.
I believe we're going to see Bela Lugosi as the eponymous Igor.
Ah, yes. Yeah, Bela Lugosi, he finally gets into the... He's all over these movies, but it takes him a little while to get there.
Right.
And I believe there was talk originally that he was going to be the creature in the first movie, and later on we'll see why that would not have worked out so well. But yeah, for now, we close the chapter, and as you said, we'll join up with the son of Frankenstein next week and see if he fares a little better with his time with the creature.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thanks again, and until next time, we'll see you then.
To be continued.
Looks like you survived another episode. The Frankencast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velazquez. Follow us on Twitter at The Frankencast, or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening.